Now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for tonight, Matt.
Hello everybody, my name is Matt and I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I'd like to thank the group for letting me speak tonight. I feel very privileged to be here. I just flew in on Friday from New York to see a couple friends of mine, and I feel very lucky that they're sober, as am I today. I'm a little nervous, bear with me. I was excited to come to LA. I go to meetings all the time at home in New York, and I've been to a couple meetings in Philly and DC, and when I went for weekend trips, I was excited to see what AA would be like when I went different places. And I was looking forward to seeing what AA is like here. And it's different. It's the same, but it's different. And it's all good to me, it's interesting. I mean, like, minute things are different. We call our birthdays, we call them anniversaries, and the format of the meeting is a little different. But it's still AA, and it's, it is what it is, and I love it. And I can't believe I say that, but I look forward to going to meetings just about every day. So, thanks for letting me speak. And no, I'm not done, but I'm just saying, thanks for allowing me to speak on, I feel lucky to come from out of town and just be able to speak. I was born in New York I'm the only child of a single mother. My father, as far as I know, is still under a table somewhere in the Bronx. And I was very well loved, just me and my mom. She made a lot of sacrifices to raise me the way she thought she should. I have nothing but love and respect for her. But the actions I took over the course of, my life might not say the same thing. I do have guilt associated with, the disrespect I've shown to her through harming myself. It's something I'm working on. It's one of my, how could I resent someone who loved me so much, but somehow I managed to do it? When I think back now, I realized that I was born alcoholic. And, long before I picked up a drink, I had alcoholic thinking. I was always told, I was loved by my family, my extended family and friends of my mother's. Everybody was real generous to me, gave me things and wanted to see me and wanted to know what I was up to and showed a lot of interest in what I was doing. I was very well loved. In school, I was told I was intelligent. I excelled in my classes. Early on, I was in a gifted and talented program, and I was always told I was smart. And I started to believe it. So I can see through there how my ego grew, and the world centered around myself. The world was aligned around me. I didn't know there was anything wrong with this. I mean, I was very young. I can't hold myself. Can't have too much guilt over the things I thought when I was that little. But it was, I thought when I closed my eyes, the world went away, and when I opened them, it was back there. I thought I had special powers. I would see colors, like when I would stare up at the sun and see colors through my eyelids, and thought I was like Superman or the Hulk or something like that. And so all through, growing up, I was told I was smart, and I thought since I was smart, I was also wise, and I thought I knew the ways of the world. And at 13 or 14, I would tell you, how things were. And for some reason, I would tell you that things were fucked up. I would tell you the world was wrong, and I had ideas about the way people should be. And I was, angry at the world for not being the way I thought it should be. It was hard to let go of. When I was 16, 17, I was filled with angst. I was pissed off, and I had no idea, what to do with it. I remember when I had my first drunk around 13 or 14, and it was great. I had everything I wanted, all the confidence. Things were just so funny, it was all shenanigans, all through my drinking. I was up to I loved hijinks and shenanigans and, all the silly shit that would happen and the capers I'd go on with my friends, and I always wanted to cause trouble. Trouble to me was fun. I thrived on antisocial behavior. I loved to shoplift. I loved just walking, had whatever merchandise I had on me. When I'd walk through the door, my heart would pound, and I would get away, and I would love it, and I knew that I was God. I could do anything, and it felt so damn cool. I thought who the fuck I was all the time. It's hard to look back on it now and just not cringe and think how stupid and ignorant I was. But in high school, I had all these ideas about the way the world should be and the way, what people should do and how to be a man. And to me, hanging out and drinking was how to be a man. That sounds ridiculous when I say it now. How could drinking make you a man? How could hiding from your fears and reality make you a man? Now I have a better concept of it, and I'm trying to, be what I think a man should be, stand up and be responsible. So in high school, I would always try to get people together. I would try to get them out, hang out. We'd go, there were places where we could get beer at 16 or 17. There were bars I could drink in at 16 or 17. The laws in New York, most clubs are 18 to get in, or it's 18 to party and 21 to drink or something like that. So my friend made fake IDs, which is, construction paper and stencils, and we went up somewhere and got them laminated. So I had an ID when I was 16 that said I went to the State University of New York at Albany. It just had my picture on it and my name in crooked stenciled letters. And the bouncers at the bar were, probably 18 or 19. And once we're in, we could do whatever we want. The bartenders probably weren't 21. There probably weren't too many people who were 21 in the bars. So, this was great to me. I loved it. Go down on the weekend, being in a bar where I thought my kind of people were, listening to the jukebox. It was all rah, throwing beers around and stuff. But early on, I had to cause trouble. I had to wait till the bartender's back was turned and reach across and fill up my beer at the tap. My friends were there and talking to girls, and I was drinking beers in the corner. I was definitely the drunkest one. I was frequently driving home. At the end of the night, I'd be the one out back rolling up a joint. I had this thing. If I didn't do things, they wouldn't get done. So I took it upon myself to I got the beer. I got the weed. People asked me where we were going, and I came up with some kind of plan. And this was great. I loved it, and it was fun. But there was always something there that I knew. This can't be it. I was never. I had a lot of fun, but I was not fulfilled at all. I knew there was something more to life. When I was growing up, living with my mom, there came a point in time where an uncle of mine came and stayed. He drank alcoholically, and I guess was at the point where he needed his sister to take him in, and he came and he lived with us. And to me, he was fun. And he drank, and he would pass out, and I'd wake up Saturday morning, and there'd be beer bottles around. But he'd get up with me, and we'd watch Saturday morning cartoons with me, and he loved Bugs Bunny and Foghorn Leghorn, and I thought he was so cool, man. And eventually he got his shit together. He got sober and moved out. And about 6 months later, another uncle of mine came and moved in. He drank alcoholically and needed his sister to take him in. My grandparents weren't going to do it. They were at the end of their rope. But he was different, he had a bad attitude, my first Uncle Phil was gracious to my mother and knew that she was doing him a service, and my Uncle John kind of held it against my mother, he fought with her a lot and was not gracious and thought that the world owed him something. And I can see it now. I took a lot more from John than I took from Phil, and I had all the bad attitudes he had. Silly shit, like he'd always be like standing in front of the mirror, checking himself out, playing with his hair and that type of thing, thinking how cool he was and how good he looked. I started doing all that, There was a time where I couldn't pass a mirror without looking at myself and like knowing that every girl's attention was focused on me. But the ironic thing was, like, the last thing I was going to do was go approach a girl and be like, say what I wanted to say to her. I was just going to get drunk in the corner instead. And so things, I partied a lot and had fun and was unfulfilled but didn't know what to do about it and drank over it. And, I didn't think too much about the future. I knew what I wasn't going to do. I knew what I didn't want to do, which is like get a job and be a good part of society and stuff like that. I wanted to, burn down the town and, tear down the walls of everything. And, I wanted to act out. I didn't know what to do with the way I felt, and I drank over it. And so I graduated from high school, and I had put all the college applications in because that's what everybody was doing. And what I wanted to do was get as far from my little town as I could. It was, I didn't know it was called the Geographic at the time, but that's what it was. And I started college. Well, before I started college, that summer, I was filled with tremendous fear. I remember not, I thought my whole life started then at 18, 17. What was I going to do with the rest of my life? I'm so glad I know about one day at a time now, because then I didn't know, and I thought it was the rest of my life. And I remember laying in my bed filled with huge fear and really seriously for the first time thinking about suicide. Like, what else was I going to do? Life had no meaning, so why live? What was the point of going through life with all its pain when it just didn't mean anything? Why not just kill yourself and be done with the whole thing? It just seemed a lot easier than going through the pain of life. Looking back now, that's really scary because I see a lot of hope in life, And to be at the place I was at, I don't ever want to be there again. But I went away to college, and, I was just at college. My mother was paying for it. I heard about college the whole time I was growing up. All her saving, all the sacrifices she made was so that I could go to college and have something she didn't. So I went to college, and, I didn't do it as well as I could have at all. I was filled with huge fear about the rest of my life, what I was going to do. So I made the decision to kill myself after I got home and broke up with, I had a girl back home, and I decided when that relationship ended, I was going to kill myself. So that was like, it made nothing I did matter because I was going to kill myself anyway. So, I didn't have to do anything that I should have been doing, and anything I did that was dangerous didn't really matter because I was going to kill myself anyway. So I did a lot of stupid shit, just put myself in bad situations, and luckily I got out of there fairly unscathed. At the end of my year at Arizona, I knew that I couldn't go back there, and I came back to college on the East Coast at the University of Maryland. And that was, I was slightly more controlled there, but, far from sober. But eventually that relationship ended, and I didn't think as much about that girl as I thought back then, and when that relationship ended, I didn't want to kill myself anymore. So I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't. I was going to jump, I had it all planned out. I was going to, go back to my hometown and do it, jump off the tallest building there and, kind of martyr myself. Everybody would see that, my death in the middle of town would be proof to everybody in the town that town and life in general was fucked up. complete like center of the universe thinking. But I didn't kill myself, and I finished college, and I finished college. I still had no idea what I was doing. I had a degree in psychology because, you know, yeah. They say a lot of people go to psychology to try to figure themselves out, and it was completely obvious in my case. You know, I wanted to figure out a law of behavior. You know, there were lots of theories of behavior. I wanted to figure out a law of behavior to figure out why people were the way they were. And once I figured out the law, I could just, you know, set up the equations so that everything would be good. You know, I could achieve the utopia that I always wanted. So, I mean, it was silly. After I finished college, I always felt like college was holding me back from all these like wild roaming things I wanted to do, like travel the country and, you know, be a bum and be a writer and all this stuff. And, you know, I wanted to be a writer or an artist or something. I thought like being fucked up and taking drugs and alcohol was like a job requirement. So like, you know, someone turned me on to the writings of Charles Bukowski when I was in college, and he was just a drunk writer. And so I figured that as long I could drink a lot, and as long as I wrote it down, it would later on be valuable to someone. It would be good art as long as I wrote down the exploits of my drinking and thinking. Whatever, I mean, I don't write too much now, but I'm working on it. So, you know, I thought college was holding me back from this romantic, like, artistic lifestyle that I wanted to lead. So when I finished college, I came out to California, and you know, because I was going to travel everywhere and do all this stuff. But it wasn't too long before I became involved in narcotics. They took me down, like, you know, really pretty quickly. You know, I saw evil sides of myself, and you know, it came to a point where, you know, I knew I had to leave the town I was living in order to save my life and get off of drugs. So I did it. I didn't want to do it, and I made preparations, and I got a car to drive back east, and I kicked heroin by driving in a car across country, and it was just this like 4-day like completely emotional whirlwind experience that you know, I was known to some of my friends as a notoriously bad long distance driver. I couldn't, you know, I drove out to California in the first place and never drove more than 3 hours straight. So I knew I was doing something totally stupid and crazy when I was coming back, but it was what I had to do to you know, to save my life. And I got back home, and you know, the last thing I wanted to do was, you know, present my mother with the horror of my drug addiction. But I knew I had to do it. I knew it would be apparent anyway, or I thought it would be apparent, so I told my mother, and we had, you know, tears and anger and, you know, the whole gamut of emotions. And I said that I would go to a meeting. And I remember my first meeting back home. It was like the day I got home, and I just showed up at this beginner's meeting. And they went around the room, and I raised my hand, and I started spouting off all this shit. And the guy who was leading the meeting was just like, "You're not going to figure it all out tonight. Just keep coming back." And I knew AA was... I always knew while I was out there that I was going to get sober in AA. The two uncles that came and lived with me while they were drinking got sober through AA. And fortunately, one of my uncles gave me a concept of God that I could believe in and understand. So I had a notion of God. It wasn't... I didn't have to, like, you know, come to AA and, you know, kind of walk my way up to, like, use the rooms first and, you know, as a higher power. I had a good notion of a higher power, and I believed in it. And I feel lucky that I had that, because I feel for people who kind of like grapple with trying to find and understand a higher power. I feel like I was fortunate to, you know, have some concept that made sense to me. So I used that concept, and I didn't get sober right away. I didn't want to get sober. When I gave up drugs, I was like, I'm not giving up drinking too. There's no way. But I knew that I started to believe that the first drink gets you drunk and would also, you know, lead me to other things that weren't good for me. So I started going to AA like three times a week-ish, and I would get a week together, like consistently and go out on the weekends and, you know, like sit there at the bar. Like my friends would have 3 rounds and I'd sit out the first 3 rounds and then I'd be there with a pint in front of me and just like, you know, hate myself and take the pint down. And one night I was talking to a friend of mine who was in LA who was sober, and I couldn't believe it. And I started talking to him about the program, and he's like asking him questions. He's like, I don't know, man, you just gotta ask your sponsor. And I was like, shit. So I knew I had to get a sponsor, and so I got one that's been happy ever since. No, not really. I got one. It really did make all the difference because it gave me a reason to stay sober because I didn't feel like I was gonna do it for myself. But you know, I got a sponsor and I stayed sober. You know, once I made 2 weeks, I was like, you know, that was way more than I had before. I only had half that. So I made probably 150 meetings in my first 90 days. I got connected, and you know, my sponsor made me wait 90 days before I started going through the steps. And the 90 days was just like, I felt like I was kind of white knuckling it. Had a little bit of a pink cloud for part of it, but I just wanted to get to 90 because I was tired of counting days. We count days back home, like, you know, we all raise our hands and share our day count. I was tired of doing that. So I never counted a day after 90. It was like somewhere in there I came to understand the concept of one day at a time. And that was a gift, you know. I consider it grace because it's, you know, not when I first came in, I thought this is it for the rest of my life. So when I came to understand that I just had to be sober for 24 hours, it made all the difference. And things just started flowing for me, you know. The guys in AA just kind of took me under their wing. You know, they were so glad to see like a newcomer, and you know, it kept telling me, wow, you're really lucky if you get it young. You know, you can do so much. And I've just been doing it, and it's good. And the thing is, like, I think the thing that made the difference is I've been honest, I've been open-minded, and I've been willing to do everything that's been suggested of me. Because I feel like, why do half of it that would just make it harder on me? You know, in my, I want things to be as painless as possible. So I figured the way to make sobriety as painless as possible is to willingly do everything that's suggested of me. You know, I don't want to, like, grapple with, you know, the things that I could grapple with. So I do it, and, you know, I have days like today where I get to come to LA and, like, swim in the ocean and, you know, like, get to speak at a meeting, you know, from out of town before 100 people I don't know, and still feel like, you know, still feel the fellowship no matter where I go. And I don't know. I'm really grateful to be here, and thanks for having me.